Hello and welcome to another episode of Everything Digital Health. I'm Marcus Bohr. I'm a GP in Yorkshire. I'm a software developer and a fan of digital health generally. This is the channel that I use to talk about all kinds of things digital health. And today we're going to talk about the Faculty of Clinical Informatics, which is something that no longer exists but was a very good idea. And to talk about that with me today, I've got Mark Bailey, who is similarly a clinician who codes. He did an episode with me a couple of weeks back. We were talking about more about the clinicians who codes mentality, and also Mark's Let's Do Digital conference, which is in a few weeks' time, actually, isn't it? Anyway, Mark, I'll let you further introduce yourself, and maybe do you want to plug the conference because it would be good to do that?
Yeah, let's get that out of the way. The FCI is the most important thing to talk about. But yes, I do have my own entity, community, fans, and people committed to digital health in the form of Let's Do Digital. It's an entity where we do webinars, teaching courses, and conferences. And our conference, Let's Talk Digital, is on the 23rd and 24th of October in my own little village of Painswick. We've got quite a few big names coming. We've got Professor Ben Goldacre, Dr. Alec Price-Ford, who's the
Nice.
National CIO for NHS England, and James Freed, who's the Deputy Director for NHS Digital Academy. This year's topic theme is education in digital health, so that would be fun. And that kind of does lead into the FCI, actually, because I feel that the FCI at its core was about education, but we get to that. Yeah, so my name is Mark Bailey. I'm a local respiratory / medicine consultant, clinician who codes, built different apps for different companies, work as a chief technical officer for an AI startup in medtech, and a few other
Wow.
bits and bobs. Yeah,
You are a busy
busy,
guy.
but loving it, yes.
You are one busy guy. So, yeah, the FCI being a an educational body. Yeah, I think what is a faculty of something? When we talk about healthcare standard setting bodies, what are these things? And I guess the answer is we have these bodies called royal colleges, and they are independent, non-profit, non-governmental, charitable often, and they have a royal assent to do their job. But before something gets to the stage that it's big enough to be a royal college, we very often have a gestation period during which it's called a faculty of something. So the Royal College of Anaesthetists, for example, was a faculty. It was the faculty of anaesthetists of the Royal College of Surgeons. So it was kind of inside another royal college, and then when it became big enough, it became independent. And I think that's the same thing happened in intensive care medicine, and the Royal College of Emergency Medicine was the Faculty of Accident and Emergency Medicine back in the day. So there's a kind of standard way to go about building a new standard setting medical body. And in healthcare informatics, clinical informatics, medical informatics, whatever you want to call it, or healthcare computing, digital health, there's lots of names for it. We needed a standard setting body for that because there were no agreed standards. So a bunch of people like John Williams and Jonathan Kay, they got together and put the pressure on to make the case of need for a faculty of clinical informatics.
Yeah.
So I think they'd had some false starts, but from what I understand, I talked to John Williams a couple of weeks back, and his episode has actually just been published. But he said there were false starts, and then it got traction, and we got to the stage where there was a real actual faculty. I mean, do you want to tell me about your first dealings with the faculty?
Yeah, I was looking through my emails to figure out when everything started for me and kicked off later. But I the exact date, December 2020. So COVID had sort of materialized and was causing havoc everywhere. But well, actually, because of that, there was less outpatient work for me to do and a bit more time to do digital. So I was building digital things in my respiratory job in Gloucester. And the CCIO, the Chief Clinical Informatics Officer for the Trust, said, why don't you sort of get involved in the FCI? So I've signed up as an associate member in December 2020.
Cool.
May 2021, I became a member. April 2022, I became a council member. And then December 2022, I became the interim chair of council, and that's when all the fun started.
So that's like quite a compressed, rapid rise to notoriety. You know, you joined as an
Yes,
associate, and within 2 or 3 years, you're like the chair of council. But
yes.
there was a lot of weird stuff going on inside the FCI at the time that
Oh, yes, I
resulted
didn't know
in.
about this. It was the poison chalice. I did not know this, but I was passionate enough to just go. I did kind of know a bit, but I was passionate enough to go, I'm going to try and take it and run with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that didn't end well.
yeah. Although I actually, you know, I don't think it was your fault. I think
Oh,
the
thank you.
outcome was already determined by the
Yeah,
time you got hold of, by the time you became chair of council. I think it was already a predetermined outcome because things had gone so far that it was inevitable that it would fall apart. So let's recap a little bit. So the Faculty of Clinical Informatics is a body that allows clinicians, so not just doctors but other types of medical professional could join, and they could become a fellow of the faculty. I wasn't a founding fellow because I didn't really feel as though I deserved to be a member originally, and so
okay.
it wasn't until an existing member emailed me and said, "Why haven't you applied?" And I was like, "Oh, you'd think I would get in?" And
Yeah,
you know, so I did. So I became, I think, in the second cohort or so. I
yeah.
was a fellow, um, and you can join as a fellow or a member or an associate, and it becomes like a professional body in the same way as the Royal College of GPs is the college that certifies that I know enough to be a GP.
Mm,
And I have to pass their exams, and when I become a member of the Royal College of GPs, I can now apply for a GP job. Same for surgery, same for anaesthesia, same for psychiatry, same for um, uh, all the medical specialties. And we wanted to try and get that happening for clinical informatics so that there would be a knowledge base, and you would have to know enough about that to be able to be certified as
yeah.
safe, to be in a position of quite some responsibility because
I think certified is the right word. Yeah.
yeah. So clinical informatics is the science and art of managing the computing that goes with medicine.
Mm,
So it's about data management, information management. It's about semantics, understanding the content of the data, and there are cultural aspects to this as well. It's about
yeah.
training so that new doctors know how to save their information in a way that other doctors will be able to read later. It's all of that, and although it's quite a new thing because it's really only come around since the advent of very widespread computing in healthcare, and there are some right ways of doing things and there are some wrong ways of doing things within clinical informatics. And so even though we can't say that we have a textbook of clinical informatics with all of that in it,
Mm.
we
Not yet, but I'm working
not
on it.
yet. No, watch this space, I guess.
Yeah.
But that the idea of a faculty is to enable people to have a professional body where they can share that best practice, and the
Mm.
faculty would have opinions about things, and might publish those opinions as well. And so that's the purpose of a body like this.
Yeah.
Um, they did get actually into trouble for some of their opinions, didn't they? Because I think one of the things that was key to their demise was that they published a paper, a position paper, which I will link to in the description, about the federated data platform, which at the time, this is about 3 years ago, that was still emerging as an idea. It was still very unclear as to how it would be delivered, and they hadn't awarded the contract at that time to Palantir.
Mm.
So the faculty did what I think is even now reads as a very reasonable synopsis of the situation and some advice and some suggestions about how to make sure that public trust was not undermined and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Now that didn't please NHS England, and NHS England were the FCI's primary source of funds.
Mm.
So magically, almost as though those two things were connected, but we're assured that they weren't connected. The funding stopped, and so the FCI had a massive funding shortfall, and was unable to continue trading. Essentially, it was all of these organisations, they function like a small company. They're a charity, or they're a community interest company or something like that.
Well, that's like all things. This is kind of a half truth. So, I mean, there's a lot. I've written down literally the whole story, and maybe one day I'll publish it as a book.
Yeah.
But there's a lot there to go through. But on that specific thing, let's talk about, if I may talk about the elephant in the room, funding from NHS England, and all the digital, expansion and transformation they want to do, but how they're actually funding it at the front line. Now, the FCI has been funded in the past by NHS England, and it got some money from subscriptions. Subscriptions was about 100,000, just over that, I think, a year, but not that much. We were getting a lot more than that. Now, the FTP paper came out in sort of April, May of 2023, I think. The last amount of the last influx of money from NHS England was 650,000 the previous tax year of so in 2021. So we hadn't received any money from NHS England, I think, beginning of 2022 or the end of 2021. We learned in October 2022 that no more money was coming to NHS, to the FCI from NHS England. So the deal was done already before the FDP paper came out.
Okay, right. Yeah.
What was happening in 2023 is that we were pleading with NHS England, please give us money, please give us money. And that was an ongoing conversation for a few years. Now, you could say the FDP paper, and I worked really hard with colleagues, I helped edit it, but I wasn't the main writer, main author. But I think it's a good paper. It talks about the problem, talks about solutions. It was very neutral, academic in its delivery, and I worked really hard to make sure that was the case. You could say maybe that's the final nail in the coffin of we're definitely not getting any money, when already we've had several definitely's before.
It's interesting, isn't it? So there is somebody within NHS England, whether they're still there now or whether they're somebody who's already jumped ship because it's about to have a total existence failure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But somebody at NHS England could have saved the Faculty of Informatics and enabled it to, bailed it out a little bit. And from what I understand, it wouldn't have required a vast amount of money to prevent that demise. It would have been able to be rescued with £500,000 or something, which for in terms of the money that gets wasted within NHS England and all its subsidiary organisations, £500,000 is pocket change.
Yeah, well, interesting figures. So we had 850,000 in sort of mid 2022, and that's all gone a year later on staffing, on conferences, on IOUs that we owed for the work that was done on the core competency, and also some bite-sized learning we had to deliver for Fed IP. It just all disappeared. But as we were speaking about before we started recording, you can do things on a shoestring, mates rates and so on, to keep things running. While we had to get a new CRM, a new system to help manage our members, why we had to spend 35,000 on a conference. I mean, I'm running a conference at maybe $3,000 a pop. Why 35 grand for a conference I think only had 100 people at with the FCI conference, and I'm doing 100 people for much less. It's crazy, and I think there was a lot of internal politics and a lot of bad decisions made by the operations side, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the CRM, and actually I was running their old CRM, so I got involved in the faculty, and that I run various forums and bits and pieces of systems for organisations within healthcare. And because of that, the faculty said, would you be able to let us have, let's have a look at what can be done for a CRM for cheap. And so I had them using something called Odoo, which is an open source Python-based forum. Sorry, not forum. It's a CRM, and we had that self-hosted and running quite nicely for about 3 or 4 years. And I was doing that for incredibly cheap because I was a faculty member. And so it's like what you were saying about essentially leveraging the skills that you have within the membership to do things internally. And at the same time that was happening, I remember thinking, this is odd, this is not quite right. Because towards the end of when I was running that CRM, they kept asking me to add new staff members. And it was every few weeks there was a new staff member joining. And I was thinking, is anyone leaving? Or are they just keeping all this staff? So I think at the peak, they were up to about 12 or 14 staff members. And from my interactions with them, I'm not convinced that they were getting 12 to 14 solid persons worth of work out of that office full of people. And I
in central London
honestly don't know what they were all doing. Because, I mean, what is the business of the faculty? It had a list of membership. It used to send out a membership email newsletter type thing. It didn't even have a bloody forum. I did repeatedly offer to them that they should have just a simple discourse forum, and that would solve a lot of their needs. They didn't have a forum. They had a website that was seemingly costing them. Well, originally the website was part of Odoo.
Yeah.
And Odoo, I'm not going to say was amazing. I mean, it was quite clunky to do edits to the website, but it was editable by a non-technical person. So they had a person who could make edits to the website. It did the job, you know?
Yeah. And didn't cost an arm and a leg.
And all of a sudden there was this big shift towards spending money hand over fist. They had premises in Ailey Street, which was, I think, sublet from the Royal College of Pathologists.
Mm-hmm.
They had 12 staff, and they also got a CEO that cost them a fortune. And this guy, I remember the first time I met him, we aren't going to name him today, but I remember when I met him and I thought, you're a chancer. I thought, you don't know anything about medicine and you don't know anything about informatics or technical stuff. So what value are you bringing here apart from a figurehead? And literally a waste of time. I would say that any organisation that can look at its CEO and know that CEO does not know anything about the business of the organisation, you might as well have a stuffed animal as a kind of mascot. That will be better than a CEO and 120 grand cheaper. I don't know how much it's being paid, but
I could speak for hours about that person and other people in the FCI, the goods and the bads. I think to sort of summarize the CEO's main philosophy, though, with the FCI was to spend money to look like we're doing well, to then get money from the NHS England.
Fake it till you make it, man.
Fake it until you make it. It was definitely going through my head just now. And it's the worst philosophy in terms of trying to fix anything that's broken with little money, is to spend it all and kill yourself. But that is really what happened from an operations side. Of course, there was other things going on within the FCI, which was internal politics, and that was quite bloody, actually, at points. And we can talk about some of that, but I don't want to go into too much details because I don't want to have any litigation, defamation problems. But, you know, there's a lot to be said about what's happened.
I don't think there's any value in going into the real sort of nasty side of things. I know a lot of the people who were involved, and a lot of them were very scarred by that whole situation. Feeling that that various people were ganging up on various other people, and there was a lot of politics going on, that politics in a bad way, things that really shouldn't have been happening. So it's a shame to see all that, but I think by that stage, the kind of damage had already been done. I think politics aside, you know, any organisation of any given size will have a certain amount of politics happening. So that's going to happen. But running out of money...
We had a big P and a small p, didn't we, playing it?
Running out of money is the thing that killed it. If they hadn't have catastrophically overspent, they would be still around now. And it's an organisation that I think should exist. If there was a feeling that it could be rekindled, I would be behind that that project, you know, to try and bring it back, because I think although some organisations have come out of the woodwork since the demise of the FCI to kind of replace some of its functions, we've got the UK Digital Health Council, which seems like a good effort and good piece of work, hasn't really stepped into the same space. I don't see it
I
happen.
don't know why, but it hasn't for some reason.
It's not in a position to award. I think the key difference, this is what it is. The Faculty of Clinical Informatics could give you post-nominals that said Fellow Faculty Clinical Informatics, FFCI. And I had that on my kind of
But you had to work to
signature.
get that. You had to show you had experience, and there'd be a panel to mark that experience and say you can get an associate member or a faculty,
A fellowship,
fellowship,
it was essentially by committee examination type of thing. They would assess whether they think you knew enough, had enough experience, and had contributed to the world of clinical informatics. I mean, that's not really how it's supposed to work. In the future, what we had hoped is that there'd be an exam, you know, that you could actually do by assessment. You could be objectively found to be good enough to be part of the faculty, just like it is with
I'm working on making that exam. Who wants to use it, we'll see. But I definitely want to have that exam because I want to prove to myself, and I want other people to prove to themselves and others that actually you're good enough and you understand enough what you're doing, clinical safety, the medicine, interoperability, the data sets, all of that boring and exciting stuff all in one go.
Yeah, it'd be great to have that kind of thing. I think before we can have the exam, though, we actually still don't have the kind of global Faculty of Clinical Informatics manual of clinical informatics. I mean, that all of the other specialties have got books written where the knowledge base that's been accrued over years gets published so that people can learn from it. And I just don't think we've even started doing that in clinical informatics.
I've started some work on it, and I have some opportunities to make it a real thing. But it's early
That's
days.
exciting. That's very exciting. I think if you definitely keep us all posted on that as that evolves, because what I kind of wish existed was a sort of wiki of clinical informatics. Essentially, we get a MediaWiki instance. I mean, it's a free open source piece of software. I've used it before. And we create a wiki of clinical informatics, and we get people, again, you don't need to do this with a great massive budget. You would ask individual people who've got expertise to write the stub of the page.
Yeah.
And then you pass it to somebody else and say, this is a stub, add something and nominate someone to pass it on. So like the Ice Bucket Challenge, you know, you kind of, each page, you do your edits and then pass it on to another person who's going to embellish it. So you get a pipeline, and that's all for free. And if I was doing the Faculty of the FCI again, I would make that a condition of joining. I'd say you join the wiki, you create a new page, at least one. You do some edits and improvements to at least 10 other pages. Now you become eligible to join. That if you want to get a faculty, you want to, you know, that's how you incentivize the actual creation of the knowledge base. I mean, it's something that worries me a little bit. I've got a slightly archivist mentality. I like to have things recorded and saved somewhere, you know, and it bothers me that people who've been very prominent in clinical informatics are retiring. There's lots of them that I know from GPIT that have retired, and that knowledge is sort of left with them, really. Because if I was to try and do this FCI type of thing again and create a knowledge base, I think I would do it with open knowledge systems. So perhaps a MediaWiki instance, set up a MediaWiki, start creating articles about specific technologies, for example. So tools that were used for GP data extraction, like MyQuest. There's nothing useful on the internet about MyQuest, except it is remembered by lots of the people who were involved in GPIT, many of whom have retired now. So we're losing that knowledge base right out of the profession. And yet we've got an opportunity now to capture it, get some information down, and more importantly, learn from it. Because, yeah, MyQuest is a defunct piece of software, but it did do things very well. And so we could learn from that as we build things like a single patient record or a federated data platform.
Well, I think the risk at the moment is that you're sort of maybe I'm talking about another episode where we talk about how do we rebuild the SCI.
Yeah, yeah, well, definitely. I would like to see it come back, but there's a bit of me, that archivist mentality, that just wants to see some of the, even without a faculty, I just want to see that wiki exist. You know, I want to see that place that we're starting to make order out of the chaos.
Well, I try and think of, whenever I do anything in life, especially anything big, I try to think, what is the primary outcome I'm looking for? And really what I want is to be able to prove to people that I'm clinical and competition in some sort of form, and also have a place where I can get the knowledge I need. That was what, in my head, that's what the FCI was, is a place that what we were trying to do in the FCI is make a medical training program, but also for different specialties like nursing and pharmacists and so on and so on. But a medical training program for registrars in clinical informatics. I even wrote the curriculum, the 4-year program after your foundation years. And that's what I saw, me personally, I see that the FCI should have been, and it was trying to be, the entity to help push forwards education. We worked with the GMC trying to get, this curriculum even to undergraduate and to med school as well. But the GMC is like, there's no room to put it anywhere, which is crazy to think. The government wants us to do digital transformation across the NHS. We're throwing doctors or new doctors out of med school straight onto the wards, and they have to use these digital things. Of course, they're all digitally literate because they've got iPhones, smartphones, computers at home, and they're brought up around this. Even a lot of them can code. But, how does an EPR work? What's a bad thing or a good thing to do in EPR? How can you cause harm to a patient if you don't do something wrong, or someone logs into, use your computer that you've already logged into, and all these sort of things? And we're not teaching even like the basics about cybersecurity and how to use an EPR, how to prescribe, how to, actually what is good and what is bad, because we just all accept the bad stuff and that's another conversation, another talk. We just accept the bad user-centered design that there is out there at the moment. My big passion, as you know, is good user-centered design. Actually, I would use the word excellent.
Well, I think this cuts across a number of different things, which I have strong opinions about. We can't train undergraduates with EPRs because we don't know which EPR they're going to be using when they get into clinical practice. We can't train them on all the EPRs either because there's too many. So without ubiquity in user interfaces, we are wasting our time. And so just to illustrate what I mean by ubiquity, we can teach a medical student to use a stethoscope because that is a ubiquitous piece of equipment that will be available to them everywhere. And in fact, they will often buy their own and take it with them. A piece of paper is also ubiquitous. If you teach a medical student to do a proper old-fashioned clerking with a fountain pen on a piece of paper, then they can do that anywhere in the world that has paper and a pen. They can go and see the patient, note down all the information, think about it, derive a plan, write it down, and record the things that were done.
Yeah.
So we've given them ubiquitous tools. You can't do that in the digital age because there's almost nothing ubiquitous. So the nearest thing we get to a ubiquitous platform in the NHS is something like NHS Mail. But even there, some hospital trusts have their own in-house email and they don't use nhs.net. So we've just done it all wrong. We have to have ubiquitous user interfaces, and if not all the same, we have to have elements that are the same. So I often use the analogy of a car, like the steering wheel and the dashboard of a car and the gear stick and the pedals. Every car might be very slightly different, but in general, they will have the same pedals in the same order in most cars. If it's a manual, it will be in that order. They won't switch them over. And that's pretty much international. So you can teach someone to drive a manual car, and they can drive a manual car anywhere in the world, but they can't do that in an EPR. And if every single airplane cockpit layout was totally different on a per plane basis, you wouldn't be surprised to see planes falling out of the sky every single day, because people would pull the wrong lever because in the other plane that they just got out of, it's over there.
Yeah.
And yet EPRs, it's a complete shit show. Everything, every single EPR, totally different layout. Some have got the OKs on the right of a dialogue. Some have got the OKs on the left of a dialogue. Some don't have an OK. Some have an apply. It's just a mess. And yet we're asking people to do high risk medicine using a fucking clown car. You know, that's what really gets me annoyed. And you know, no one talks about this. I've been in health informatics for 15 years plus. I have never heard anyone, and I've been to many conferences and listened to an awful lot of drivel. Has anyone said this is the kind of standardization we need? No, just total passivity. Anyway, calm down, Marcus. Let's get it back to the faculty. What?
No, I totally agree with everything you said, and I feel just as heated about it. But you already know my opinions on it, so I'm not
totally.
Going to repeat it.
That's why I bring you on, so we can get angry. So the faculty would have been able to gently steer the industry towards some appropriate standardization. So, like a really good example would be the common user interface, which was abandoned in just before the COVID period by Matt Edgar, who was meant to be the great hope of bringing government digital service type quality into NHSX, and he just deleted the common user interface and did nothing to replace it. I don't know why or what the internal conversations were like. Maybe I should FOI them. It would be very interesting to know who decided that that's a thing that's necessary. Because what was actually needed was a refresh of the CUI. The CUI at that point was 20 years old and had been primarily written in Microsoft Silverlight. So it needed redoing. And it could have been excellent. For example, the ribbon at the top, where we've got the same bits of information about every patient in the same places. That would be great. If every single EPR had the date of birth in the same place, the name in the same place, the address in the same place, the allergies in the same place, alerts in the same place, we would know where to look for them. And it would start to become standardized, so that at least your muscle memory then means that you know you're looking at the top right for allergies, and it's always there in every platform. That is the kind of thing that we needed. I think you don't need an FCI to insist on that. Anybody with a set with gumption could have.
Well, look at the internet and internet standards. Like, the internet exists despite there being, I mean, there is a WWW consortium now, but the internet just grew organically because people wanted to connect to each other. And there was different standards. Like Xerox used to have an internet standard, the printing company. They used to have a standard for internet, and they all sort of, we finally found the one that we like, HTML and, the TLS and all those sort of different things. But, we're not seeing that kind of merging into a single way of communicating between systems in the healthcare. And there's many reasons for that, and we can spend hours on that. But people don't want it to, like the big companies at least, is I think one of the bigger drivers for it.
I think whenever you have this conversation with suppliers involved, they start to talk about market differentiation. So they want to be able to say that our layout is better, and therefore they have to prevent everybody else from having that layout. And my opinion on that is, okay, if you think it's genuinely better and your layout somehow saves lives, then by preventing that layout becoming ubiquitous, you're committing a crime against humanity. And I've talked about this before. I think people think I'm a nutter because of I phrase it that way, but I do it on purpose because it's awful. If you genuinely think that you've got software that can save lives and you don't open source it, what are you? You're certainly not a doctor, in my opinion.
Well, it's like the seatbelt from Volvo. They didn't actually patent it and say no one else can do it, and it saves countless lives. They let everyone put a seatbelt in.
That's
we'll talk about seatbelts, another conversation later. But,
That's a really good example because Volvo invented the seatbelt, but they did not patent it. They allowed other companies to have it because they didn't want their seatbelt to be a market differentiator. Anyway, we're maybe digressing a little bit, but these are the kind of things that you need a faculty of clinical informatics to do. It provides a home for people who want to discuss this kind of stuff and arrive at best practice. It certifies them. It also it helps with revalidation. So in the UK, at least, you have to revalidate your medical credentials every 5 years, and that process is compliance with a fairly lightweight appraisal system. So you have an annual appraisal, you get some feedback, you have to do some continuous professional development, and at the end of that you can be revalidated. That's fine if you're a clinical doctor, but if you've retired entirely from clinical medicine but you want to stay a doctor that works in clinical informatics, and there are many of these people who work in, say, NHS, what was NHS Digital, now NHS England, they might be working for private companies, there should be a pathway for that to happen. And the faculty was working on being that thing. So you would revalidate with the Faculty of Clinical Informatics as an informatician.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I've been trying to find analogies to this. So basically, if you're seeing patients, you can stay a doctor. But if you stop seeing patients, but do things that save patients' lives, like make better digital systems or speed through their cancer pathway, for example, because you've automated certain processes, which I've worked on, then you can't be a doctor anymore. And it makes no sense. So now if you start thinking about doctors that don't see patients, there's a few of those. Public health doctors, for start, they don't see patients, but they make big changes that can save lots of lives and improve lives. Now, why do they get their own specialty? But us, and I know we're kind of a new entity, like digital health in England has been around since the 1960s when we did some automation and stuff like that. You and GP Land have actually done it since the 1990s. Secondary care is quite far behind. There's still some hospitals, trusts of the 200 that don't even have digital systems. They still have paper notes. Why do we get public health people that are doing big things? And I would argue digital doctors, nurses, and so on are doing big things, but we can't be recognized for that work we do. And yes, the FCI or something like it should exist to help push that agenda that we need a specialty in digital health, medical health, clinical informatics, whatever name you want to call it, to help that.
Well,
because I can't see any other way of doing it.
The public health has the Faculty of Public Health Medicine, and that's doing the same job that we would have expected the Faculty of Clinical Informatics to do, to give us revalidation, to allow us to continue practicing. My own personal hack is that you can apply, I think it may be because I'm an Irish citizen as well as a British citizen, I'm on the Irish Medical Register and they don't have revalidation. So you do CPD and you certify that you've done that. And so I do relevant CPD for my sphere of my practice, which is clinical informatics. And so I remain a doctor that way. But that feels like a hack, and it's not open to everybody, I don't think.
That's interesting. A hack, I think all digital health is a hack. Now, I'll expand on that. Most people who do digital health fall into it because they've hacked something to do something, or they found a way to make digital health work, or actually they know how to fix the printer and someone says, you know digital, come and do this digital thing. But they kind of hack the job together for a year. You do this thing that you're really excited about, and then you get kicked out. And it happens to everyone. It happens to me. I just got some spare time during COVID, like I mentioned before. But then actually my old trust, they wanted me to do less and less digital. And it's amazing that politicians talk about, let's do digital health, digital transformation, let's digitize everything, let's speed up things. But we're not seeing at the front line the training, the digital literature of patients and clinicians and admin people alike. And I just feel like it's not really being implemented the way it should, and it's all hacked together. Now, I love hacking, like as in computer building things and making things better. Now, hacking sounds like a bad thing, but in the olden days, it meant literally just writing code that made something that works great, but it's got a bad name for itself. I don't think it's a bad thing, but in the bad term of hacking, I do think everything's sort of clumped together or pulled from different places and not really, big picture. Let's try and make a specialty. Let's try and teach everyone about digital, teach people how to make good digital, recognize good and bad digital, how to do digital safely, and all those other things.
Completely agree with you there. I think because there isn't really a lot of proper career paths in clinical informatics, everybody falls into it somehow, and you find your own way of making it sustainable in some way. And because of a lot of those jobs are either inside organisations like NHSE, D, etc., or they're for private companies. That's why people don't share their knowledge, because it's all commercial in confidence, or it's NHS England behind the iron curtain of their organisation. And there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't have wide open discussions about how you do data linkage, how you do privacy, how you do coding, whether SNOMED is adequate, whether the interplay between all the other different terminologies and the DM&D, and where is the place where all this stuff is being discussed? It's nowhere. It's absolutely nowhere. There are very significant major problems with how we do digital health in the UK. For example, the Edifact message, which I think was mentioned in the John Williams episode, it's orphaned, meaning that there is no part of the health system that's in charge of making sure that that message can express a modern concept, because it's designed to work with read codes, and read codes have been retired, but no one bothered to update Edifact. And that is a fundamental dependency. It's a dependency of lab systems. So we can't send messages to and from lab systems into GP systems without Edifact. That's a huge glaring issue that nobody is solving. And it wouldn't really be that hard to solve. It's a messaging standard. It just needs a new messaging standard, one that can cope with modern SNOMED, for example. And basically, we're in a driverless car. You know, somebody is asleep at the wheel here. We have got organisations that should be on top of this, and they're not. And the faculty of clinical informatics would be able to apply pressure and publicly state these are the things that need to be fixed.
But that was, or is, one of the problems, that how can you be critical of the person paying your bills? And that's the difficult thing.
Yeah. So I think we probably best sort of bring it home really with the faculty. I think we talked about what it was, what the intentions of it were, and how it went out of business. And I think key in their mistakes was relying on NHS England. I found them throughout my time in clinical informatics. I don't blame individual people within NHS England, but the organisation as a whole is very fickle. So it doesn't seem to have principles. It doesn't have guiding concepts. It does in a sort of flurry of activity. It'll do this thing for a while, then it'll suddenly jump and change to do this thing for a while. Then
driven by the politicians who want some new toy. Yeah.
It's totally confused. It doesn't have the ability or the maturity, I will say, to steer the course of safe clinical informatics over decades, and look after people's medical records over decades, and ensure that data is not degraded, and ensure that the right data is in the right places.
Yeah, and I think you're actually on spot with that. And I've realised something over the last year, I would say, though I haven't been in clinical informatics for long, 6 or 7 years, but the last year I've realised something. If you want to do anything good in digital health, you have to leave the NHS, build the good thing and bring it back.
Yeah.
If you try and do anything in the NHS, especially anything sponsored by the NHS or in some ways controlled by, it seems to fall by the wayside. Like, we've had how many bodies destroyed recently because of lack of funding? Yeah, it's that's the only way to do things, and I think that's bad, because then that sort of says you have to go to industry and you have to talk about venture capitalism, which has got good and bad sides, but I've got my opinions on that. But you know, and it would be nice if the NHS England could actually fund things that should happen, but I think it doesn't know how to do it well, and that's why you have to go outside and bring it back.
I agree. That's the conclusion I've come to as well, which is you've got to go outside the NHS. That's the only way you can get what you might call editorial control over this stuff as well, because if you do it within the NHS and you say, I want to open source it, and some idiot who doesn't understand open source will say, I don't understand open source, so it's easier for me to say no. And they'll refuse to do it. And so much innovation actually was genuinely developed at NHS Digital, and a lot of it just got destroyed.
Mm.
It wasn't open sourced, and could never be expressed outside the organization. So it's just been deleted. You know, things like they had an identity agent that ran on Android and iOS, so that they were
Mm.
already thinking towards using smart cards or something better than smart cards that worked with mobile devices which don't have a smart card slot. They were right on it with that 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and that project was just deleted. It was never open sourced, it was never continued. And that's one example. There are thousands of other things that could have been brought out. You've got to get outside the NHS. And
Yeah,
so, like,
it seems to kill itself somehow. It's I don't know what the good expression for it is, but it doesn't know how to do the right things right. I think it knows it should, but it just doesn't deliver on it, which is really horrible to hear because I think great things about the NHS. I'm a doctor in the NHS, but it's really sad seeing it sort of being its own, destroyer in some ways when it comes to digital health.
yeah, I mean, it's in a real pickle at the moment because of the reforms. You've
Mm.
got people in meetings sitting around pretending that they all know what neighbourhood ways of working means, even though nobody knows what neighbourhood ways of working means. And it's quite funny to listen in and just hear them waffling on. And these are not clinicians and they're not technical people, but they're trying to work out how they're going to deliver essentially an undeliverable pipe dream of vague, fluffy clouds of ideas.
Yeah.
It's not, GPs don't work like that. They have got established ways of working that have been around since before the NHS was founded. I don't think that a new Secretary of State for Health is going to be able to change that with just a few ideas. But yeah, it's, the NHS is just sadly in utter chaos at the moment, and I would say I have fairly low opinion of how informatics and tech is done in the NHS, but it's even worse than usual now.
Yeah.
We've got, I think it's at about 5% of its normal productivity. So, like, just towards the end of this episode, I wonder if we might want to spend a couple of minutes just like thinking about how, if we were going to do the Faculty of Clinical Informatics again, because I think it does need to exist. The other organisations
Yeah.
have not filled its boots, and so something needs to exist that does this. How would we do it? What would we do differently? What would it look like to you?
It's a really good question. I've been thinking about it, since I resigned as chair of council from the FCI back in 2023. It was in a bad place when I joined, and it was in a terrible place, way after I left. And unfortunately, it dissolved, taken up by the British Computer Society, and they're holding it dear. Just looking after the little puppy that it is, sort of in a solid, state of just waiting to revive or sort of start growing again. But how would I rebuild the FCI if we started from scratch? I think we had some amazing, and a lot of them amazing people in the FCI who understood digital health, who understood change management, who understood medical, who understood nursing, who understood all these things and how to make things work together. And we did some amazing things there. We also made, as a whole in the FCI, some bad decisions about how to spend money and what we were sort of pursuing in terms of the internal politics. The charity side of it made things very complicated, and I would not want to go down a charitable route. Now, that sounds weird to say, because of course it should be a charity. It's doing a charitable thing.
It should
But
be a
when
non-profit.
it should be a non-profit.
But
Now,
that
the
doesn't
reason I
mean it
say
has to be a charity.
yes. Now, yeah, and then we can go through the specifics, but the problem with charities is that you have a lot of sort of governance within it, and you can say that's a good thing or bad thing, but there's death by committee very much was a problem in the FCI, and it's in lots of these charities as well. But you've got trustee boards, you've got councils, you've got subcommittees, professional subcommittees, and so on. And it just got very, hierarchical, and things got translated wrong, like in the NHS, but on a slightly smaller scale. I do think it should be incorporated, charitable incorporated entity, where there's more of a flat structure. You get the right brains in there, you get people that can make things happen. Unfortunately, we couldn't make things happen in the FCI because I wouldn't say it was lack of money. It was just the sort of the death by people just not agreeing and so on.
Yeah.
Or we'll talk about that in a month's time, because everyone's doing this in their own time and so on. I think start small, and the FCI did start small, and build the things that you need straight away, simple and cheap. A discourse, a forum, a way to manage subscription fees, and whatever money you make from subscriptions, you can have maybe an admin person and work on some small projects and put all the information in one place that everyone else can learn from, and a community behind it.
Dead on. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've been trying to do that in Let's Do Digital, but I have less and less time nowadays because I'm doing so many things. I'm not saying Let's Do Digital is going to be the new FCI. I don't think it should be, but it's been a good way of me learning about all the things that we need to know about for a new FCI. But I just think, I like to think about the new FCI as a development team using agile methodology, Kaiser, so iterative improvement on every little task, and learn from our mistakes, showcasing everything every 2 weeks, and building and building and building. And take away all this paper pushing, all the red tape, and all the things that slow things down. Of course, have all the governance and safety and the legality stuff sorted out, but actually use, because most of us, well, a lot of us in digital health understand agile methodology and how to, especially as clinician code, and how it's so beneficial to build fast, fail fast, build fast.
Totally.
That's how I do it.
I think that's right. I think it's right. So a charity is just a special kind of business, isn't it? But it has to have certain things in its constitution, and it has to have a board of trustees, and it's responsible to the charity's commission. And there's a whole load of extra stuff. So you can get rid of all that by being a community interest company, which is a company limited by guarantee. You can incorporate one of those in a day. It's dead easy to run. I have run 2 CICs, Lee Hackspace, which is still going, and something called OpenGP SOC, which was a project I did a decade and a bit ago. They were both CICs, worked very well. The governance is still good enough to prevent somebody running off with all the cash, which is all you need, and the rest of it just is very lightweight. So your business structure is simple. As you said, I agree. Don't hire staff, because I think the more staff the FCI hired, the less got done. That's the way it felt to me. Whereas if you had...
Also, you need staff that understand digital health. And I have trouble picking out one person that understood digital health or health in its entirety.
Well, here's what you do. There were 1,000+ members of the faculty when it ended. More than that. I think it's about 1,200.
Yeah, 1,300.
Yeah. So you just pay for little bits of the time of the people who want to do it. So you say initially
you got a membership of experts in the domain that you need. It's really weird that we asked other people that didn't know about this to come and do it, when we're like, well, you and me are shouting like, this is how you do it in like an hour.
You automate everything that can be automated. So membership payments, you make that mega simple. So there's use some e-commerce platform so that you just annually get billed automatically, and then once you've been billed, you're added to the right bit of the discourse forum, so that that's how you know that you're a member, because you can see the bits that are membership only. Right now, you now no longer need a membership secretary and a whole supporting cast of Excel spreadsheets. You've just done it. And then all the stuff that's actually important, like the wiki, that first of all, that should exist. So you make it exist. Someone has to sysadmin that. It would be easy to get a member to do that. If it starts to get where that's actually now a fairly onerous bit of sysadmin work, then you pay them half a day a week or a day a month to just look after that one bit. And it'll still be cheaper to do that than to have members of staff floating around.
Yeah,
which
you're starting small and building up as things go.
Yeah.
Where we too quickly got lots of staff, 12 at max, and spent all the money. It was just wrong. There's so many things wrong, and that was the big wrong.
Your website should be the barest minimum of website on GitHub pages. End of story.
But that's good enough.
Yeah. And then that just links to the forum and the wiki, and everything else is in there, which is where you put the dynamic changing content. And you don't need a newsletter. Your forum does your newsletter. it's all solvable, and maybe we should do it. All we need to do is find out who's still hanging on to the domain name.
So we've just spoken about this, and I've spoken to the people in BCS, and it's all very possible, Marcus. You and me just need to do it.
So the BCS own the domain name. Well, if you actually
Well, I don't know if they actually own the domain name exactly, but some of the sort of legal stuff around the FCI. So it's the tricky one, but
as it stands, the FCI website is still there, the WordPress one, but it's been vandalized. It's covered in adverts for like online gambling, basically because it won't have been updated. So there'll be a vulnerability to that WordPress version, and some script kiddie has pwned it, and now they've just sort of dicked around with it and then left it there. But so it needs to be got rid of, and someone needs to repatriate the domain names. So they had facultyclinicalinformatics.org.uk and they had fci.org.uk.
Yeah, and it all written out in full. Yeah. I mean, getting URLs is one thing, but actually making and building and getting people involved is another. The second one, the latter one being harder, but doable.
Well, I own the GitHub organization.
Yes,
that's the one thing I still have control of. And that actually has some useful code in it. It's got the NHS number validation tool, Python library for NHS number validation, which was a kind of collaboration between a number of different organisations.
Yeah, I remember being quite excited when I saw you working on that with your colleagues.
So I think, well, that's it. That's the FCI, the whys, the hows, the what happened, and the what would we do next.
Step-by-step guide. Yeah, we know how to do it. Just
I think
started Jitsi board now.
the community knows how to do this, and we could do it. I know that if you've got 1,000 people paying a membership fee of what was it, £200-300 a year?
Yeah.
Not all of them were on that full the full fellowship membership, but that's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
In my book, for running an organisation, that's an annual income, and you just make sure that the organisation doesn't spend that much, and it will start to accrue a bit of reserves, and then, hey, if it had surplus, you could start software projects like a common user interface replacement. That would be amazing.
Hey, I would work full time to make the FCI work if there was a paycheck at the end that covered my mortgage. Honestly, I still believe in it that much.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mark, for your time. It's been really good to have this conversation and, to bring some of this stuff out into the light of day, because actually these are things that some people know some things about, but probably still a lot of faculty of clinical informatics members wouldn't know the full story of how it all came crashing down. So it's nice to put this stuff out there. Hopefully we haven't upset anybody. We haven't gone out of our way. We haven't done it on purpose. We wanted to share the story, but we've tried to be as non-pejorative as possible while still explaining.
There's so much learning. There's so much learning around this as well. I think what we should take away from this is what can we learn from this and what can we do better. Let's not go around hating people. There's so much to do. It's
happened. It's done. But I love the idea that we've got really good opinions about how we might do it again and bring back this faculty. And I know we're not the only people who think this. So let's end it on that positive note, which is maybe there could be a phoenix from the flames situation here. Once again, thank you so much, Mark, and I'm sure we'll do future episodes with you. I'm looking forward to seeing you at Let's Talk Digital. I will definitely put booking links in the show notes, because it's going to be a good conference. It's a great little sort of grassroots conference with no bullshit. It's just all killer, all good ideas and good people. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Thanks.
No problem. See you again. No, bye.
Bye.